Coming up on UGTV, Board of Commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
I'll now call the meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call. Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Gilbert.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia. Here. Alvey.
Here. This evening, the invocation is being given by Reverend Artrell Harris of Roswell Church of Christ. Please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Lord, we thank you for this day. We ask that you will continue to let us forever praise you for just waking us up this morning. Lord, we have so much to be thankful for. We ask that you will continue to bless our great county, Wyandotte. Bless all the areas that are represented here. Lord, we pray that you will continue to comfort the officers, the sheriff's deputies that were lost, comfort their families, protect our policemen, protect our EMTs, protect our firemen as they're on the job. Lord, we pray that we will continue to strive as citizens to support our local government to help Kansas City, Kansas be a better place. Lord, we're going to ask you for, we ask for prosperity in our community. We ask you for higher paying jobs for people who are looking for a living wage. Lord, we ask you for more housing starts, that more houses equal property taxes going down. And so, Lord, we just ask you for the common person to help us out here. So bless us, Lord. Bless this group that's of decision makers for our community. Bless all that are here tonight. Bless and keep us. Keep all of our kids safe. Keep them safe in our pools this summer. Keep them safe in our communities. It's in the mighty name of your son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Harris. I'd ask the clerk if there are any revisions to tonight's agenda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have a revision under the administrator's agenda. We have a new item. Item number 2 is regarding the SAFER grant for the fire department.
Thank you. So tonight we have 2 distinct parts to our meeting. The planning and zoning portion will be handled first, followed by the regular commission meeting. I'd ask the clerk to read the statement required by state law governing the planning and zoning portion of our meeting, followed by the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor David Alvey, Commissioner Melissa Bynum at Large District 1, Commissioner Tom Burrows at Large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, Commissioner Brian Buchanan, District 2, Commissioner Ann Mugia, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnson Jr., District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, is unable to be here, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, and Commissioner Jane Philbrook, District 8. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has 3 options. Number 1, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes. Number 2, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. And number 3, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration, together with the statement specifying the reason for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the planning and zoning consent agenda items, have received a unanimous vote or recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the Planning Commission's recommendation on all items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Most of the petitions before the Commission tonight may be determined by a simple majority vote. However, if purchasing property owners representing 20% of the land area within 200 feet of the area in question have signed and filed a protest petition, at least 9 votes by the Commission will be required to approve the zoning amendment petition. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we would appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and the commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any item on the planning and zoning agenda. I will ask if any members of the commission wish to disclose any contacts with proponents or opponents on any items on the agenda.
Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item of the planning and zoning consent agenda?
Do we have any disclosures?
Sorry.
Yes, I've been contacted about SP 2018-1 opponents.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum?
Prior to the return to tonight's agenda, I had previously had contacts with proponents of 2018-1. I've had contact with, on the planning and zoning non-consent, with proponents of 2018-37.
Thank you. Commissioner Markley?
I received email correspondence on SP 2018-37.
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. I've had contact on SP 2018-1 proponent.
Thank you.
I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Do you have a...
Commissioner Walters?
I'm sorry. I've also had contact on 2018-1.
And Mayor, my light must not be working. I apologize for interrupting.
That's right.
It's on here, but not on up there. I've had contact with SB 2018-37 for proponents and opponents.
Thank you.
I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Change of zone application, item number 1, 3162 Anthony Tucker. Change of zone from R1 Single Family District to AG Agricultural District for an accessory structure at 4141 and 4244 North 67th Street. Recommended for approval. Special use permit applications, item 1, SP 2018-1 Stephen Warbert. Special use permit to continue to keep a storage container at 239 South 72nd Street. Recommended for denial. Item 2, SP 2018-59 Justin Bing with Victor Liquor, LLC. Special use permit for expansion of an existing liquor store at 2819 South 47th Street. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 3, SP 2018-60 Billy Cobb with Bear Real Estate, LLC. Special use permit for an Airbnb at 2810 West 42nd Avenue. Recommended for approval for 1 year. Plan review application, we have one item, PR 2018-18, Brian Hill with MKEC Engineering, preliminary plan review for an elementary school at 8833 Waverly Avenue, recommended for approval. Those are all items on the consent agenda.
Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any items on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by one vote to follow the recommendation of the planning commission. Are there any set-asides? Yeah.
My name is Cordelia Walker, and I live at 8701 Georgia Avenue, and I received the notice about the property at 8833 Waverly Avenue, and my property is within 200 feet of that property. I really more have a question and a concern.
Are you asking for us to set that aside, and then you'll have an opportunity to address that when we come to that item?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, for clarification, that's PR 2018-18.
Yes, sir. Please come forward.
My name's Stephen Marvitt. I live at 239 South 72nd Street, and I want to set aside the SP 2018-1.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. Should I set aside regular consent item number 1 at this time?
No, only on the planning and zoning.
Only planning and zoning items? Okay, thank you.
Move to approve all other items as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call Johnson.
Aye.
Markland.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to set aside item B1, special use permit SP 2018-1. Stephen Marvitt to continue to keep a storage container at 239 South 72nd Street. The Planning Commission has recommended denial. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
This case was sent back to the Planning Commission to determine whether the storage container was being used for agricultural purposes. And this is really a two-part question. The first is the storage container being used as agriculture? And if it is, then we do not have jurisdiction over it. But if it's not, then it requires a special use permit. And if it requires a special use permit, at that point, we look at the factors in the staff report and make a decision for approval or denial based on those factors. Since this has already been sent back to the Planning Commission, it cannot be sent back again. A decision has to be made on this. And the Planning Commission determined that there was not enough evidence that this was being used for agriculture, and therefore needed a special use permit, and then recommended denial of the special use permit.
Thank you. I'd ask the applicant to please come to the microphone, present your item, and address your concerns brought up by staff. Please state your name and address for the record.
Stephen Marvitt. I live at 239 South 72nd with my wife, Michelle Latisick Marvitt. And got a few pictures here of items that are going to be kept in the storage. That's what I got it for, was agriculture, to put in my tractors in there, brush hog, and other implements to keep out of the weather. I needed something that was durable and airtight. I mean, this equipment is not cheap. According to Code of Ordinances, Section 27-608, I got a copy of it here. States that storage of equipment and machinery is necessary to raise crops and livestock, to carry out the farming business, and to maintain the property. Section 3, accessory buildings such as barns, silos, other exclusively agricultural structures, roadside stands, etc., provided that such structures are set back at least 50 feet from any street line is permitted. So that's basically all I got. I mean, I don't know how much proof they expect.
Thank you, sir. So I will now open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in favor of SP 2018-1. If so, please step to the podium at this time, give us your name and address.
My name is Natasha Meyer. I live at 253 North 31st Street. My parents are Michelle and Stephen Marbett, that resides at 239 South 72nd. As he just read, the container we're able to have as long as it's being used as agricultural purposes. They bay hay and plant all their own fruits and vegetables, things like that, which is agriculture. As my dad stated, they did buy the storage bin to put anything that they need for their plants, fruits, brush hogs, things like that. Like he said, they're very expensive equipment that can't be, some of it can't be left out in the weather. So I don't know what more you guys are needing to prove that it's for agricultural purposes. His property is agriculture, which I don't see a problem with them having a storage bin. I don't see why it's went this far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Seeing none, I'd ask anyone who would like to speak in opposition, please come to the podium and state your comments. Give us your name and address. Seeing none, there are no further comments or questions from the public. I'll close the public hearing. Would the petitioner like to make any closing comments?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve as staff recommends.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning for denial. Roll call.
Roll call: Johnson.
Aye.
Barkley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to set-aside item, plan review application PR 2018-18, Brian Hill with MKEC Engineering for an elementary school at 8833 Waverly Avenue. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Mayor, I have a number of items that I'd like to amend with the staff report under the factors to consider. Would you like me to address that now or after we hear from the public?
Now.
Presentation first.
Okay. This case was heard by the Planning Commission, recommended for approval. I wanted to make some adjustments and changes to the factors to consider. Under number 2, which is the extent to which the proposed use would increase traffic or parking demand in ways that would adversely affect road capacity, safety, or create parking problems. Streets are designed so as to provide a safe and convenient functional system for vehicular traffic, and having such width, gradient, location, and structural quality as to accommodate prospective traffic as determined by existing and probable future land uses. I think one of the major concerns about this project from staff is that it will force quite a bit of traffic onto 91st Street that 91st Street is not designed to accommodate. Jeff Fisher with Public Works is here and can talk more about that. But one of the other major concerns is that it does not connect to Waverly in the east. And right now you have a traditional neighborhood to the east where there is a walkable school, and under this site plan, there's no sidewalk or road or any other connection. So people who live very close to the school property would have to walk, if they were to walk or bike, would have to walk all the way out to the collector, all the way out to the arterial. There's no sidewalk on parallel, so they would be either in the street or walking along the roadway up to 91st and over. So I feel that is not convenient or functional. And Jeff Fisher can come after I give my further comments to talk about the effect of the bus traffic on 91st Street. The other factor, one of the other factors I want to change is the degree of conformance to the proposed use to the master plan. Our Sidewalks and Trails Master Plan states that connections between educational facilities and neighborhoods are #1 priority of the public. This is based off of surveys and community meetings that were held. It said that the sidewalk network is intended to address basic pedestrian needs, including but not limited to connecting neighborhoods to schools, parks, and transit lines, and other important local destinations. And it has a implementation item to proactively work with the school districts to leverage this plan to secure funding and resources through Safe Routes to School and other programs to address Priority 1 connections between schools and the adjacent neighborhoods. Due to these statements in the master plan, I do not believe that this proposed land use conforms to the Sidewalks and Trails Master Plan. Number 4, the capacity of the proposed use to meet applicable ordinances and other requirements. Our subdivision code, under the streets section, the first item states that except for courts and cul-de-sacs, streets normally shall connect with other streets already dedicated and adjoining and adjacent subdivisions, or provide for future connections to adjoining undivided tracts. In this case, Indian Woods did build a street following this recommendation, this requirement in our code, up to the property line, and there's a temporary cul-de-sac at the end of the street here. And that was built that way to anticipate future growth of the neighborhood in a planned and orderly fashion that would continue the growth into this area. The plan doesn't have any connection to that temporary cul-de-sac. Number 9, assurance that buildings, lots, blocks, parcels, and streets are so arranged as to afford adequate light, open space, or air, facilitate fire protections, and to provide for long-term sustained real estate values. Particularly that last item, long-term sustained real estate values, I want to address. Real estate values are related to quality of life. And living in a neighborhood where your children can walk to school is a quality of life issue. Right now, this is a neighborhood where kids can walk to school. There's a school here that I'm sure many people who are listening or in the audience grew up and walked to school there. This plan would take that away. According to the testimony at the Planning Commission, the plan is for all children to be delivered to the facility via vehicles, either bused or dropped off by their parents. This plan would make this neighborhood a less attractive place to live. It would not provide for the long-term sustained real estate values. I prepared a diagram showing what a site plan could look like. If you'd like to see it.
No, I think we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Doug Clements. I'm the Director of Physical Properties with the Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. At 2010 North 59th, have several members of the design team, Brian Hill with MKEC Engineering, Gordon Kimball, and Brittany Weiser of HTK Architects. Frankly, I don't quite know how to respond to the comments concerning these are both the first time that we've heard any of these through our conversations with public, through the staff or the Planning and Zoning Commission process. I think we would like to work through these issues with the city to make sure that we're providing a quality project, which we think we are. I probably would disagree with the last comment about real estate values in the area. For us to build I won't go into the numbers, brand new school in the western area of the county. It is true there's an existing school there now. The new school won't fit on either of the two sites that we're going to combine on this site. So having said that, like I said, I don't really know. We don't own the property between Waverly and our site. We attempted to purchase that property. So like I say, I don't really quite know how to respond. I think we probably need some time to work with the city and the staff.
Thank you. So I'd open the public hearing, ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in favor of PR 2018-18. Seeing none. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
My name is Cordelia Walker. I live at 8701 Georgia Avenue. I am broker owner of Cordelia Walker Real Estate, and I have worked in real estate in Wyandotte County for nearly 20 years. My reason for coming tonight is when I'm wondering what's going to happen to my property value when this property was purchased. If I'm understanding correctly, and please correct me if I'm incorrect, 15 acres in Wyandotte County at 88th and Waverly, purchased by the school district for $670,000. That puts that property at over $40,000 an acre. And I got this letter because I'm within 200 feet of this property. In probably, I guess, 1996, I bought 22 acres, the same acreage that I live on right now, for $18,000. I understand that real estate has gone up and down over the years. And being a real estate broker, I know the real estate values in Wyandotte County like the back of my hand. $670,000 for 15 acres. I just don't understand how that is going to impact me. Number one, would I be able to sell mine for that much? I doubt that I could find someone. Or what's going to happen to my taxes when you have purchased? I have my house, I'm sorry, my house sits on 5 acres and the rest of the acreage is separated in terms of taxes. And this property that was purchased for $670,000, the UG last year said the land over there was worth less than $60,000. And this year, our school district had purchased it for $670,000. I'm just asking for clarification. What should I be thinking as a property owner within 200 feet of $40,000 per acre property? How will it affect me?
I don't know. Yes. Is there?
Your time is up. Thank you.
Question. Okay, so in other words, I just want to clarify this. You're concerned about what it's going to do to reevaluation of what your property is worth when it's time for yours to be reevaluated. How is that going to affect you in the great scheme of things? Good question. I'm sure it is not going to decrease it, but I think that that would be a question that we would have to put through Kathy Briney and have her run it through, you know, the state's requirements to give you an idea, because I have no idea. You know, we don't, but it's a good point that you bring up, because anything that's bought around you that's sold for a lot more than you is definitely going to affect you later on.
It's beyond a lot more than me.
No, but
it's not even comparable. $670,000 for 15 acres of land in Wyandotte County. It is absolutely unheard of. It has never been done. I looked for comps. I'm a real estate broker. I have access to everything that's been sold in the last 10 years. $670,000 for vacant land.
Oh.
And no one can tell me now, after having the school district having approved that, how it's going to affect me.
Your time is up.
I made a recommendation.
Okay, I
her.
appreciate it.
And that's the way I would go.
And how will I hear back on what happens with that
Can we ask
recommendation?
Kathy Briney to give her a call, please?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone with any questions or comments? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Would the petitioner like to make any closing comments? Would you like to make any closing comments? Thank you.
I would like to move that we send it back to our planning and zoning, because he requested that we did, and since he's the petitioner.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call?
Roll call. Johnson?
Aye.
Barclay?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Philbrook?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Mugia?
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, there goes now. Next, we have one item under the Planning and Zoning non-consent agenda. Item number B1, Special Use Permit Application, SB 2018-37. Chad Bartlett with Home Remedy Investments, LLC, is requesting a special user permit for an Airbnb at 4448 Booth Street. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 for denial. I have been advised that a valid protest petition has been filed with the clerk's office. This will require 9 votes by the commission. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
This is an Airbnb in a single-family house, similar in a lot of ways to ones that we've seen in the past and approved. However, it's probably most similar to the one that we denied, which was out west in, I forget the name of the neighborhood, but it was Canyon Lake, on Canyon Lake Drive. But it was denied, the Canyon Lake one was denied based on the operation of the Airbnb, the fact that they were having large numbers of people there, and that it was operated by somebody who was not in the immediate vicinity of the property. So this one, I believe, is similar to that in that they reportedly have large numbers of people there and have created parking issues and other concerns for the neighborhood. So staff recommended denial and the Planning Commission recommended denial of this application.
So at this time, I'd ask the petitioners to come forward to present his application.
Good evening. My name is David Nachman. I'm an attorney. My address is 10990 Quivira Road, Suite 200, Overland Park, Kansas, 66210.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciate that very much. We're asking for a special use permit to allow short-term rentals in this home at 4448 Booth. This is a really cool block. There's 23 homes on this block. Everyone knows who lives in all the houses. This house, 4448, was vacant for 10 years. It was an eyesore. It was dilapidated. It had mice and birds living in it. Before Chad Bartlett, my client, bought it, there was crime there. There were 3 break-ins, and one of the neighbors had to chase away an intruder. He bought the house last year and fully renovated it. Chad's an Army veteran. He's a father of 4. He resides in Overland Park. He lives nearby and is a Kansas resident. For 6 years, he's been finding dilapidated homes and rehabbing them into safe, clean, nice homes. By the way, he can't be here tonight because he's traveling with his family. He has a family outing that was pre-planned and prepaid long ago, so he asked me to speak for him. When Chad bought this house last year, many viewed it as a wonderful benefit for the neighborhood. He spent over $100,000 purchasing and renovating the home. I've passed around pictures. Does everyone have the packet with the pictures? Thank you. Just want to show you some before and after pictures. You can see how on page 4, the exterior roof, the exterior was totally rehabbed, new roof, new painting. There's been foundation work, electrical, plumbing throughout the house. Pages 5 and 6 show a completely rehabilitated interior, all new surfaces, floors, ceilings, paint on the walls, all new appliances and granite countertops on page 7 in the kitchen. Page 8 is a renovation of the basement. What used to be a vermin-filled disaster is now a fully code-compliant home, and it's charming. He's improved the neighborhood value and increased the tax base. After the rehab, Chad listed the home on Airbnb in October 2017, before the city had any limitations on Airbnb. At that time, and ever since he's opened this up for Airbnb, he's never had been informed of any police calls or reports. When the special use permit process came in for special uses, he filed his application, and since then he's been adding house rules. Since this process has been going on, he's added house rules to ensure fair treatment by his guests of the home and of the neighborhood. He has since last month, he has a posting on his Airbnb listing. This is not a party house. There's no parties or gatherings allowed. No more than 5 adults in the house. Quiet time after 10 o'clock. The authorities may be called if there's any violations. He's also adding personal contact with the guests to reiterate the importance of following the rules. Now, admittedly, I'm going to go through some of the complaints that staff has heard and that you're going to hear from the neighbors. Those happened months ago. With these new rules and these new procedures in place, we do not, as staff suggested, have large gatherings of people there now. We don't have parties there anymore. Those things have been stopped. Of course, when Chad made his application, he notified all the neighbors. He gave out his cell phone number to the neighbors. There was a sign in front. And but through March, at the first hearing, there were no complaints. No one showed up to oppose the deal. Then in April, at the City Commission, there was no reports or opposition beforehand, but one neighbor did come and express some concerns, and the commission referred us back to a mediation to work that out. So on May 9th, Chad and I sat down with city staff and the neighbor to hear what the concerns were. And she was a next-door neighbor, and she had some concern about the parties at the house, admittedly. She didn't really complain about the noise because she said that she and her husband retire early. They closed the window, put on the fan, and the noise really didn't bother them. She said that she had a concern for her dogs in her backyard, but she also acknowledged that she opened the gate between her yard and our yard and let the dogs run into our yard to play with our guests. She complained that some people had left pizza boxes out on the picnic table in the backyard. She said that someone left the house late at night. And either she or another neighbor said that there had been some mowing of the grass sometime between 9 and 10 o'clock one night that was irksome. So the next door neighbor asked us if we would install a privacy fence to help with some of her concerns. And we're agreeable with that. We're agreeable for installing a privacy fence. We also learned at the May mediation talk that there was a petition that had been circulated around the neighbors saying, we don't want to have any Airbnbs in the neighborhood. And this was signed by a number of people. But interestingly, there are other Airbnbs in the neighborhood, and one of the signers of that petition is the owner of that other Airbnb, and I'm kind of wondering how reasonable that is. So there have been other complaints. I mentioned about the mower. And there was a complaint about a bachelorette party. Again, we've stopped those. We're not having bachelorette parties. We're not having bachelor parties. We're not having gatherings. We're not having dinner parties. Those are prohibited under the house rules. We were also informed that a neighbor counted 28 people walking into the house on Mother's Day for a gathering on May the 13th. Again, we are prohibiting gatherings like that any further. On the last page of the handout, I'm showing you a listing of the neighbors and the purposes of the, a listing of the guests and the purposes of the visits since April through either May or early June. You know, visits to KU, a business meeting, going to a Royals game, daughter's wedding, traveling for work, traveling across the country and meeting a night to stay in town, visiting family, business meetings, doctor's appointments. Most of the uses that have been there for the last couple of months have been for, you know, just normal, quiet uses. Admittedly, and I did disclose on here that there was a bachelorette party early May. We've stopped that. Those are no longer being allowed. Those are prohibited under the house rules. So it seems to me, based upon what I've heard in talking to the neighbors, that this is not a protest over illegal activity or police needing to have the police show up to stop problems, but the fact is that Chad's an outsider. He doesn't live in the neighborhood. They don't know him. They don't trust him. They think he's a stranger and he's aloof. And you know, I don't know what to say, that, you know, I don't think that's a standard for denying a special use permit, that the neighbors think that the owner of the house is a stranger and is aloof. You know, a special use permit is not a popularity contest. You know, there's no requirement that the neighbors like the owner. And if the applicant presents a reasonable application, it ought to be approved. I will say that this special use permit process is a positive way to fix the neighbor's concerns. We want to be a good neighbor. We want to take care of those concerns. And the stipulations that the staff has presented are a way to fix that. Chad was charged by the Planning Commission to meet with the neighbors to check out their concerns. He reached out to them and was unable. I mean, they wouldn't basically meet him. He asked, when can I meet with you guys? And they said, they gave him no date or time. So on June the 9th, I personally walked around the entire neighborhood. I walked this entire block, all 23 houses, and 3 more houses back behind the house, because I wanted to talk to the people and find out what they had to say. I knocked on 24 doors, and I actually talked to 10 people. Of those 10, 5 had no problems at all with the house. 2 more people had no personal problems. 2 more people had not seen any problems at all, but they had heard from other people that there were some concerns. So 7 out of 10 people that I talked to had no problems. 3 people had seen or heard something. They thought there was, one of the parties was too noisy, or that there was mowing, you know, between 9 and 10 o'clock, or some other issue. Again, the special use permit stipulations, I believe, will solve any of those issues. Chad has given his telephone number to all the neighbors as requested by the staff, and he's been contacted periodically, and he promptly responds to the neighbor, and if necessary, he has contacted and confronted the guests to make sure they're not doing anything wrong. I talked to the next door neighbor, adjacent on the other side, about what they felt about this house. They thought it was great that the house had been renovated, that there's no longer mice and birds living in the house. They've had no parking problems. They had no problems whatsoever. I talked, 2 of the other neighbors on the block said they felt they had been pressured by some of the other neighbors to sign a protest petition, but they didn't want to take sides. There are other Airbnbs in the neighborhood. One of the other neighbors that has an Airbnb had a bachelorette party at her house. And I'm not aware of any complaints about that one, but there was a complaint about our bachelorette party. It just seems like there's some inconsistency going I talked to two people directly across the street from the house, and they had no problems with the house. Two of the people living back behind the house had no problems with the house. Chad is using the screening process to make sure that there will be quality people, quality guests using the house under Airbnb. Airbnb has a screening process. You can find out how many guests are there. You can get their name, times of use, purpose of the visit, get personal data about them. In addition, he is checking their rating and reviews on Airbnb to make sure they haven't used Airbnbs for parties or improper uses. And he's getting a copy of their driver's license so he can check them out further. He's also adding that any violations of the house, the authorities will be called. This house is monitored constantly. After every guest, there's a cleanup crew that goes by to make sure the house is clean and tidy. He has a yard company, a lawn service, go by weekly to make sure that the yard's kept up. And either he or his project manager goes by periodically to make sure everything is in order or to check in on the guests. Chad wants to do anything reasonable he can to accommodate the neighbors' concerns. He feels he's been very responsive whenever an issue's come up by a neighbor. As I mentioned, he's willing to install a privacy fence in the backyard as the next door neighbor had requested. He is willing to add a security deposit with his guests, so if the guests violate any of the rules, they have a economic incentive to comply with the rules. He's also willing to follow the staff stipulation, and he puts this on the listing, that the parking is to be in the driveway and only one extra car on the street to minimize any parking issues. I do want to point out that the things that the neighbors have pointed out that you're going to hear from are concerns that the neighbors have, and that's their perception, that's fine. But we're not talking about illegal activity. The police haven't been called to come out to round up any wrongdoers. The kinds of things you're going to hear are things that an owner could lawfully do in their house, or that a long-term renter could do in their house. Things like smoking outside, leaving pizza boxes on the table, parking on the street, having people over, having cars over. Those are all things that are irksome to the neighbors, admittedly, but those are all things that an owner or a long-term renter might do. Chad also realizes that if you grant the special use permit, it is subject to revocation. So he has great incentive to make sure he complies with all the stipulations of the city. Now, as to the 8 legal standards for approval of a special use permit, which the staff report reviews, there's only one that is debatable that is an issue, and that's the one that says whether the proposed use is reasonably necessary for the convenience and welfare of the public and will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of adjoining properties. I believe this commission has already determined that Airbnb short-term rentals are reasonably necessary for the convenience and welfare of the public. This property is near KU Hospital. As you see from our list of guests, many of our guests are family members of patients, and they want to be near their family in the hospital. Other guests have had business meetings at the hospital. Other guests are traveling cross-country and want to spend a night on their way across the country. So we believe that this short-term use is reasonable and appropriate, and it's needed in the community. And there's no substantial and permanent injury to any adjoining property. I therefore respectfully request that the commission grant the special use permit and render findings of fact in support of its decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in favor of special use permit 2018-37. This is in support. Anyone in support? This is, yeah, thank you. All right, seeing none, is there anyone present in opposition? Now you can come forward. Please state your name and your address.
Yes, sir. My name is Edward J. Bernal. I live right next door to Chad's residence. I called him numerous times about a break-in in the backyard, and he told me if there's a break-in, they're going to be fired, whoever his helpers are. And I called him about the marijuana in the backyard, and I called him. He called me at 2:30 in the morning, his first month there. At 2:30 in the morning, when I gotta wake up at 5, I'm a union pipe fitter, local 533, and he calls me at 3 a.m. and says, "Who was parked in my driveway?" I'm saying, "I'm sorry, is it time to get up?" He says, "No, it's time. Who's parked in my driveway?" I said, "I'm sorry, I haven't, who is this?" "This is Chad." And I look next door, and he's outside in his residence. And then I tell him who's parked in his driveway. My neighbor, only because we've been taking care of Johnny's property for 10 years, and nobody's parked there. But he goes over to Oscar's, our other neighbor's house, pounds on the door, wakes him up at 2:30 in the morning. And then they have to move their car. I mean, what kind of neighbor is that? He's not a good neighbor. He doesn't even live here. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Thank you, sir.
How you doing? Reginald Odom, 4440 Springfield. And the reason I'm here is that, you know, this gentleman is supposed to have been coming back, meeting the people in our neighborhood to talk about these situations. He's never came to us. He's never came to the neighborhood association meetings. Because here's the situation. There is other Airbnbs. I didn't even know about them. Why did I know about his? We worked hard to clean up our neighborhood. You know, I have 3 little girls who run around that neighborhood. They don't need to be in this type of mess in their neighborhood. We used to have break-ins in our neighborhood. We don't have break-ins no more. I know everybody in our neighborhood, and everybody knows me. And when this situation came about, I have to stick with my neighbors, because that's all we have. We worked hard for this thing. I'm not saying this man is a bad man. I'm saying this man came over and done some things that we as a neighborhood don't want in our neighborhood. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Dana Sweeto. I live at 4446 Booth. Chad has not enforced the recommended rules the zoning commission has directed. Please help us save our neighborhood. It is clear Chad cannot monitor in the Airbnb because he does not live in the neighborhood. And if you look at the back document that I've just given you, he has moved to Guatemala. On his statement on his Facebook page, he owns 30 other properties. And he is happily practicing minimalistic lifestyle with his family and going to be moving forward and traveling, using, I guess, his Airbnbs here in the States as his primary form of income. You know, Mayor, you know, you are calling for a new focus on the neighborhood, calling for a better quality of life for Kansas City, Kansas residents. We must attend more clearly to our traditional neighborhoods because our neighbors deserve a better quality of life. I had mentioned also in the information that there are numerous bachelorette parties and a listing of, you know, the police, the graduation party. I'm sorry, there was one time the police were called. Living next to an Airbnb is like living next to a trailer park, a constant stream of people coming and going all hours of the night, noise, parties, disturbances. My family immigrated to Strawberry Hill in 1930s. My grandparents owned a watch repair shop on Minnesota Avenue for 30 years, also owned property on 118th Street by the Speedway. I purchased my home in 2001. I have supported Wyandotte County for years. Please listen to the mayor's agenda and keep with the traditional neighborhood, we deserve a better quality of life. Thank you.
I'm Florence Jackman. I live at 4453 Springfield Street. My back of my property goes to his. Chad is not a good neighbor. The other B&Bs, you don't even know they're there. He is not a good neighbor. And the attorney said that he talked to the neighbor next door, and Mr. Laskin is handicapped. And so he wanted me to correct the statement that he made. He said he told the attorney that he was glad they fixed up the house, but he doesn't like the traffic going back and forth. He worries about his son getting into it with the neighbors. His son used to be a policeman, and he spends the day with his dad and goes home when his dad goes to bed at night. And he said, you know, there were 5 guys over there the other night smoking pot. And he said, Anthony called them, nothing gets done. Well, nothing gets done because Chad's not here. He doesn't care about our neighborhood. For 54 years, we've worked hard to keep that neighborhood nice. And it's not been an easy job because right across 43rd Street, we have a bad element. And we work together to keep the neighborhood. We support our policemen. He says, well, they didn't call the policeman. Well, we have 2 policemen on the street. They're shorthanded. We're not going to call them because of minor things that are going on. You know, there were some things that were going on. If Mark had been home, I would have run across the street and said, go do something. You know, he would be here tonight.
We have 1 minute.
He wasn't working. What I'm saying is that we have a decent neighborhood and we want to keep it that way. Mark is traveling around the world doing whatever he's doing. He doesn't care about us, and we don't want him there. We don't, if you're going to put a B&B in our neighborhood, then they need to be like it started out, where it's their house that they live in, or they live close so they can monitor it, not people from the outside coming in and just having a party house.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Carol Hill, and I live at 4472 Booth, and I've lived in the neighborhood for 27 years. We have the most wonderful little neighborhood. We have babies, we have little children, we have a 3-year-old, we have a 5-year-old that play in the street. Many times there are so many cars down there, and they're up and down the street. It's really dangerous. And I want you to know the house was not dilapidated. There was an elderly lady that lived there. Her children lived around, and she didn't want to sell the house until she had passed, so they kept it. And the neighbors mowed it. Everybody kept. There has been nothing done on the outside of that house since the day he bought it. He may have fixed up the inside, but he did nothing on the outside. He's done nothing to improve our neighborhood. We love our neighborhood. We're all family in the neighborhood. If it was someone come quiet, but they're not. I've been down there. There's been beer bottles. They've been standing on the front porch. There's music. We don't have loud music. We respect each other in our neighborhood. We love where we live, and I hope you will let us continue to love it.
Hi, my name is Karen Main. I live at 4465 Booth. I'm a new resident to the neighborhood, having been there about 6 months. And some someone mowed my lawn the first day I moved in. It was Reggie. And that was just an amazing thing to me, that a stranger would come and mow my lawn. There's a great deal of caring for each other there. I wouldn't want to see that destroyed. And I think it isn't the issue of Airbnbs, but it's the kind of Airbnb that is in the neighborhood that's destroying the peace and quiet that we deserve and that we've built on. So thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Jatame Taylor with Roselle Development Association at 1403 Southwest Boulevard. The nearby neighbors in this property are the best ones to tell you about the impact that this business is having on their lives in their neighborhood. I'd like to talk about what makes this proposal different than the other proposals that have come before you. When this proposal first came to the Planning Commission in March, there were like 7 Rosedale short-term rentals also on the agenda. RDA supported all 7 proposals because they were supported by the immediate neighbors. And because short-term rentals, when operated appropriately, like have a positive way for residents to make some money, but also provide a service to those who are visiting Rosedale. This proposal is a little different for 2 important reasons. First, the issue of proximity and accountability. The other short-term rentals in the area were either owner-occupied or the owner or a family member was in the residential area. There are issues with this property. The owner of the issues with this is that essentially this owner is not being held accountable since he just visits instead of lives in the neighborhood. The second issue is the scale of the business. During the March Planning Commission, one of the planning commissioners commented that this proposal was different than the other proposals. It appeared to operate like a business, if I remember correctly, is what was said, and voted against the proposal. 4448 Booth is an LLC that owns and operates other short-term rentals as well, which combined with the issue of proximity and accountability makes its operation more like a hotel or your traditional bed and breakfast. Hotels and small local businesses are essential to the neighborhood, but in the middle of a single-family home is not appropriate location for the business.
You have 1 minute, ma'am.
Thank you. I recognize that there's a lot of feelings that are running high with the neighbors in this community. I think that what you're seeing is just the frustration of them knowing that they have a quiet neighborhood and then realizing that there's a business running in the middle of it. We appreciate and thank you for listening to the neighborhood's opinions and thoughts.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'd ask the petitioner if you'd like to make any final replies.
Thank you very much. I think as you can hear, there are complaints by neighbors about various items, not about things that rise to the level of illegal activity or where police need to be called. The stipulations from the city, I mean, Chad, it will agree to the stipulations from the city because those will solve all the things that they're talking about. A lot of the things they've been talking about are historical things. And so he's been implementing the new rules that are posted on his Airbnb site. I believe that is in your materials with the staff report. But by having those restrictions and being able to screen his guests and follow up with them, he'll be able to have guests who will be quiet. There won't be too many people, because the staff has even said this Airbnb is okay with up to 5 adults. And so we agree with that. So we could have, I mean, a guest could have up to 5 adults and maybe a couple of kids, some night, but the cars have to be in the driveway and 1 car on the street. Which is not disruptive of the neighborhood. So we're agreeable with the staff recommendations for those kinds of things. And we realize if we don't comply with those things, this is subject to revocation, and we wouldn't want to start this thing, just come right back and have a revocation. So we're ready and willing and able to meet the requirements of the staff recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Commissioner Murguia?
You have a couple of staff questions. You said this is a valid petition, that you verified that. Are all of the petitioners that signed this, do they reside in this residence? Is this their home and they reside there?
The way that we evaluate whether it's a valid protest petition is whether the signature, the name of the signature, matches what we have as the owner of record at the appraiser's website. And if there are multiple owners listed, it has to be both owners that sign. So you'll see that it was 33% of the area within the notice area, which is 200 feet from the property, had that valid protest where both, either there's one owner and they signed or both owners signed. There were other properties where either one or the other owner signed, but not both, and those were not included.
Okay, so you can't tell me whether or not the people that signed this protest petition actually live at this address?
It's possible that the owner does not live there and rents it. In that case, it's the owner that would need to sign it and not the renter.
Not necessarily the person that lives there.
Correct.
Yeah, and you are aware that 80% of Rosedale is rental, correct?
I'm aware there's a large amount of rentals, yes.
Well, it's unfortunate, but I would like to know the number of these people that signed this petition that actually reside in the neighborhood, or if they are landlords also that don't live in the county, that just rent their property. So I'm not sure how we do that, but I'd be curious about that. The Airbnbs that are currently in this particular neighborhood, do the owners of those Airbnbs also either live in the home and rent a room, or do they live in the neighborhood nearby?
All of them, either it's their primary residence, and there's one where they live within a couple blocks.
Okay, so that's the Airbnb piece of it. So in our policy, I know that we did a rewrite in regard to our policy in regard to Airbnbs. And does our policy require an Airbnb operator to live in a neighborhood or close by to the Airbnb in order to get this kind of, I guess you would call it a license?
I don't think that we have a clear written policy specific to Airbnbs. We've been following the special use permit procedures, which applies to all commercial businesses in a residential area. So we've been sticking to the factors to consider, which are listed in the staff report, and that's how we evaluate each one of these on an individual basis based on those factors.
Okay, so those factors, are those the factors that we refer to as the golden factors?
Yes.
Okay. And within those golden factors, the reason when we deny something, we have to be able to justify the denial by identifying a golden factor. That's correct?
I think that's correct. I'm looking at the attorney.
That's correct. Okay, so we just don't have the discretion to deny unless it relates to one of those golden factors, correct?
That's correct.
Correct, yeah. Because before, when residents haven't liked something and we have supported the residents' wishes, we've been taken to court and it's been overturned by our district court. Is that correct?
That has happened.
Okay. So this is my district, so this is what I have to say. I appreciate all that you do to make your neighborhood great and safe, and I want to continue to be supportive of the people that live in that neighborhood. And so as a result of that, I am going to support your wishes that you do not want this Airbnb in your neighborhood, okay? But but I will tell you this. Let me give you some advice in my district. It is not your issue that our police department is understaffed. It is not your job to take policing issues into your own hands or disturbances into your own hands. It is your job to pick up the phone and call 911 and get it reported. Then it's documented, and there is something documented that demonstrates that this home or this property owner has been an issue for the community. Right now, there is no evidence of that, other than your testimonial, which is a he said, she said game, which isn't necessarily going to work in court. So I think that's an issue also. In regard to your concerns about parking, parking is an issue all over Rosedale. In every side neighborhood that's over there, to me, in that particular neighborhood, that would be a hard argument to say that parking could be an issue. And I do agree with the petitioner that anything that he is holding there currently, any of one of you could be holding at your own home and creating the same kind of problem. So I don't really see that there's a factor to consider there either. But my politics have always been to support the people that I represent. That's what I intend to do. But I would not be surprised if this decision was overturned by our district court. It would not surprise me. So I'm trying to give you some friendly advice and say if you want to deny Airbnbs or rental property in the future within your neighborhood, you need to have the evidence in order to get the commission to support that in the future. Okay? So I would make a motion then as a result to uphold our planning and zoning's decision and in support of the neighborhood's petition. And again, I'm not sure that that qualifies as a golden factor, but frankly, I don't have anything else.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Bynum, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the motion. I would like to just draw staff's attention and maybe the applicant's attention. Within our agenda packet, it's on page 133 if anybody cares. It speaks about previous actions regarding this item, and it states that at the April 5 Board of Commission meeting, we referred it back to planning so that the neighbor and the applicant could discuss concerns. Then there was testimony in May at the Planning and Zoning meeting, at which time the applicant asked that it be held over again for 1 month to work through the issues. Based on what's been provided to us by the neighbors, if I were an applicant at an April 5 meeting of the Board of Commissioners and had my items sent back for the concerns of neighbors, I'd start working on those concerns on April 6th. But instead, what we see is on April 6th, there was a party. And 6 more incidents after that, according to the documentation of the neighborhood, leading up through apparently just last weekend. So I'm going to support Commissioner Murguia's statements, but I'm not having a hard time doing it.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Johnson?
Aye.
Barkley?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Philbrook?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Murguia?
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Just to be clear, Bridget, is that the last set-aside item? That was it. That concludes the planning and zoning portion of tonight's meeting. We will now move to the regular portion of our agenda. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the regular consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
Second.
Commissioner Bynum?
I would request that we briefly set aside regular consent item number 1.
Thank you.
Move to approve all remaining items as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0, that motion carries.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Bynum.
Thank
Set
you.
aside item 1.
Thank you. I just wanted to set it aside very quickly because I wanted to clarify for anyone here and anyone watching on this particular item. There have been concerns about the property that might need to be acquired, and just, we have Jeff Fisher here, our Director of Public Works. If you could just take 30 seconds to a minute to explain that it is not our understanding or intent that any actual homes are needed.
That's right, no homes. This will pass between houses and along roadside. Some easement needed, but no homes.
Thank you. I would move approval of item 1.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0, that motion carries.
Thank you. We have 2 items under the administrator's agenda. The first item is the comprehensive annual financial report. The second is a SAFER grant. I'd ask Mr. Bach to take over.
Thank you, Mayor. As we do annually, we have an outside audit conducted. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. As we do annually, we have our outside audit conducted. This evening, I will turn this over to our Chief Financial Officer, Kathleen Von Atchen, and let her begin the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Annually, we do our financial audit, and I'd like to report the results of this audit. Before I do so, I want to explain a little bit of what is a comprehensive annual financial report, which we're going to shorten and call it a CAFR. It's a set of financial statements for a government. It's in compliance with 2 accounting standards boards. It's the it's the generally accepted accounting principles and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The financial information is audited by an independent auditor who will be talking with us tonight. And she utilizes generally accepted governmental auditing standards. So within the comprehensive annual financial report, there are 3 sections. First is the introductory section that orients and guides the reader of the report. And then there's the financial section, which includes a number of items. It includes the management's discussion and analysis, which presents a summary of all of the information contained in the 220-page report. There's also the basic financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, which is about 80 pages of very detailed information about the unified government's financial position and its liabilities and assets. There's also all of the combining statements, and so the last section is the statistical report, and we have 24 tables with a lot of detailed information over the last 10 years. So if you want to get the report yourselves, it's located on our accounting department website. So now, why is this important? It's important to have the CAFR because it provides transparency to our residents. So it makes it more accessible. We provide all the information about our financial performance in this report. Secondly, accountants let the numbers do the talking or tell the story. The CAFR reports actual financial results of the prior year, which is different than the budget, which is a fiscal plan for the future year. And then lastly, financial statements are required by state law, and bond documents. Some of the stakeholders include citizens, bondholders, grant providers, donors, credit rating agencies, and the like. So I have 2 slides that kind of highlight some of the major items of the CAFR this year. So they're kind of key takeaways. First of all, and I might use a few acronyms here, I'll try to explain. First of all, we restated the retiree health, which we call OPEB, other post-employment benefits. We restated that liability so that it declined by $26.5 million. And you can see that on page 59 or 86 through 88 of the CAFR. And the reason for the decline was because we implemented GASB 75, which caused us to change our actuarial assumptions. The GASB 75 statement made it so that all municipalities basically use a uniform basis for determining the liability for retiree health. And it turns out that the actuarial reports we had been utilizing previously had actuarial assumptions which were overly conservative. And so as a result, our retiree health dropped from $100.4 million to $84.5 million at the end of the year. The second highlight is that our net pension liability also declined by $7 million. That's on page 77. Declined from $180 million to $173 million. So that's good news, although we still have that liability outstanding. The third item is that general obligation debt grew by $36 million. 29 million of it is governmental, and 9 million of it is sewer enterprise. And that discussion can be found on pages 59 through 69. Also, this 2017, pardon, is the first year that the STAR revenues were funding operations. Previously, we were collecting STAR revenues, but those were going towards paying the debt service on those STAR bonds. So now they're being reflected in 3 of our governmental operating accounts. So additional highlights include that the governmental funds deficit net position improved by $28.7 million. So although, we still have a deficit position of $14 million, it's not as much as it was last year, which was around $43 million as a deficit. There was a modest increase of $388,000 in the general fund property tax revenue compared with the prior year. And that modest increase reflects a net activity of the assessed value increase in 2017 minus the reduction in our mill rate for the city general fund. Fund balance of the general fund, it grew by $9.2 million, when you can see that on page 27. And as we go through our budget process, we'll talk about that in more detail. But basically, as I mentioned in other workshops, our revenues came in roughly about $3 or $4 million higher than we budgeted or estimated. And then our expenses were about $3 or $4 million lower than expected. So that's why that net happened in our general fund. And then lastly, as we've talked in other workshops, the dedicated sales tax revenue was $10 million, which is dedicated for public safety and infrastructure. You can see that on page 114. And that tax is set to expire on June 2020. Taxpayers will be voting to renew this tax on August 8th or 7th.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you just, quickly explain the top item, governmental funds deficit net position improved by $28.7 million, although still in a deficit position of $14.7 million. So what are the implications of remaining in a deficit position of that amount?
Right. So the deficit position last year was a deficit 43. Now it's 14. So, of course, an improvement is always much better. In the future, as we work to reduce our liabilities, then that deficit position will dissipate. Many of the local governments throughout the United States have deficit positions because in the last 2 years we've had to implement or record the full value of our pension liability, and as well as the full value of our retiree health liability. So it's not uncommon for local governments throughout the United States to find themselves in a deficit position. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the financial results, and I'm going to show a series of graphs. Now, when we do a financial results discussion, you have to keep in mind that we're using various accounting bases. So the near term is basically the traditional fund statements, which are on a modified accrual basis, and then the full value or full accrual basis is found in the government-wide financial statements. So it's kind of a public sector challenge because the primary goal of private sector is to make a profit, whereas government has an economic goal. They do have economic goals, but the principal objective is societal, to provide services to citizens. So that explains why there's a kind of a difference in the accounting basis throughout the document. So first, the traditional fund statements. And now we're only going to talk about the unified government. The BPU is an agency of the unified government, and we include the BPU activity in the enterprise fund or business type activity columns of the statements. But for purposes of this presentation, we're only going to talk about the UG without the BPU. So near-term financing, governmental funds, fund balances. This is a graph that starts from 2012 through 2017. And it basically breaks up the financial activity or the bottom line fund balances by the category of the activity. So we have general fund, capital projects, the debt service fund for economic development, and other governmental. And you can see over time that, especially in the last 3 years, that we are in the positive. This is near-term balance, fund balances, right? So the kind of lime green color is the general fund, and that number's been growing. The deficit positions in 2013 and 14 are a result of timing related to our temp notes and the use of the temp notes and the fact that cash had been drawn down during that period, but the temp note liability was still in place. So that's the reason for those. This is a graph that shows since 2008 the fund balances of the general fund. So as you can see, back in 2008, we started out with a 13.8% fund balance, and what that means is that the fund balance amount was 13.8% of the total expenditures and transfers. So during the recession, it dropped down to 6.8, and then it picked back up around 2012, dropped a little bit in 13 and 14, and now we've been building our fund balance to a level that is above the general, the Government Finance Officers Association recommended level, which is 2 months of operating at 17%. So we're doing better here in terms of providing sufficient reserves in order to meet our operating expenses and liquidity needs. So I wanted to talk briefly about the fund balance policy. So currently at the Economic Development and Finance Committee meeting, committee, we are discussing potential proposed revisions to our fund balance policy. So the proposed revision is that it shall be the goal of the unified government to maintain a minimum fund balance in the general fund of 2 months of expenditures and transfers, which equates to 17%. And that is best practice of GFOA. So also in the proposed policy, we've put in an aspirational provision that we achieve over the next 5 years, potentially 1 more month of operating expenditures to help us mitigate any risk of economic uncertainty or emergencies. So for this 2017 CAFR, just to give you a little bit of detail, the general fund balance is $40 million, $40.9 million, and actual expenditures and transfers are $198.8 million. So 17% of that is $33.8 million. The actual $40.9 million into the expenditures actually equates to 20.6%, which is above the 17% level, and it's above that 17% level by $7 million. So that $7 million is, we have more in our fund balance currently above the 17% of a total of $7 million. So we often look at this one, it's the debt capacity. So right now, state law requires that we cannot exceed the amount of applicable debt, general obligation and other applicable debt, that total cannot exceed 30% of our assessed value. And so right now, at the end of 17, the total amount of applicable debt in relation to the assessed value at 2017 totaled 61% of that debt limit amount. And so it has been growing. The increase in 2013 was because of a change in the accounting practices for that took place during that financial audit. So previously, the state portion of the STAR bonds that had an annual appropriation clause had not been included in the financial statements, and beginning in 2013, it did. And so that's partly why that increased during that year.
So just to be clear, we're at 61% of the 30% limit.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes. So now here's the government-wide financial statements. Now these statements are basically set up as if it were a private business. So they're full accrual accounting, and these statements include both the UG and the BPU. So this is total net position of the entire unified government, and broken up by unrestricted, restricted, and then net investment and capital assets. And as I mentioned, overall, the net position of the unified government is in a deficit position, and the deficit amount is in the unrestricted category. Now, did the unified government financial position improve or deteriorate? You can see that this is basically the change in net position divided by beginning net position. And over the last 3 years, our net position has been improving. So this shows the statement of activities, which is another word for income statement. And basically what we've done is divided up sort of the activity by kind of the activity category. So beginning at January 1st of 2017, we had, and this is broken up by business type activity and governmental activity. So you can see that the business type activity is quite a bit larger than the governmental activity. And that's because we have the BPU portion included there. So at the beginning of the year, we had a deficit position in our governmental activity of a negative $43 million. And on the business type activity, it was $540 million. During the year, we collected the revenue in the second column. The governmental collection activity was $307 million, and business type was $334 million. And that was offset by expenses, which are in the third column. And then I mentioned that we had that prior period adjustment due to the other post-employment or retiree health. And so as a result, the final net position is $560 million for our business type activity, and then a deficit of, it's $15 million rounded, so. So over the past 18 years, the Unified Government's Accounting Division has been submitting their annual financial report to the Government Finance Officers Association for a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And over those past 18 years, we have been awarded that certificate. So for the past 18 consecutive years, we've had that. And this is a very important award. It means a lot to our credit rating agencies, but it also demonstrates that not only are we in full compliance with the best practices, but that we are committed to the transparency that I mentioned earlier. So I want to thank you as the commission for your support of the prudent financial practices. I'd like to thank all of the Unified Government Department staff who are very important and integral in the accounting cycle, in the paying of bills and payroll and so forth. They're very helpful. To Doug Bach, our county administrator, for his support. I'd also like to especially thank Pamela Cahal, our acting accounting manager, which is sitting over there in the corner tonight. I shouldn't have included myself, I guess. And then there's Deborah Johnsher, who is our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, also sitting over there next to Pam tonight. All of the accounting division staff, and then a special thanks to some of my other division heads. So Rick McKessick was the accounting manager for all of the 2017 fiscal year. And then in February, he accepted the position of county treasurer for the unified government. Ron Green, our payroll manager, is very important in our accounting cycle, and Reginald Lindsay, the budget manager. And finally, I'd like to thank our external audit team at Allen Gibson and Holick. So at that point, I would like to introduce Tara Laughlin, who is the Vice President of Insurance for the audit firm that we use, unless there's any questions. So.
Good evening. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm Tara Laughlin with AGH. I am the Vice President in our government practice at our audit firm, and I oversee the external audit for the unified government. I am here tonight to present some required communications that under auditing standards we have to annually present to those charged with governance. Those can be found in a letter that was provided to you that has required communications kind of in the front of it. I'm going to highlight on the main new pieces of this communication letter for this year's audit, just to briefly go over these communications tonight. The first thing I do want to cover is, as Kathleen has already mentioned, the unified government did implement a new accounting standard this year with GASB Statement 75 that does cover that retiree health, the other post-employment benefit liability. This statement changed how the prior OPEB liability was to be valued. So as Kathleen mentioned, that actually provided a benefit to the unified government in that that liability was reduced by roughly $26 million under the new evaluation process. The standard also added quite a few footnotes to the CAFR. So as you're looking at this year's CAFR, you're going to notice that the OPEB plan footnotes are a few pages longer than they were last year, and you're going to notice that they look very similar to the footnotes that were already presented for the pension plan. So now both of those retiree-related liabilities provide the same information within the financial statements. Not all numbers within the financial statements are hard-known numbers. Sometimes estimates do have to be made. There are 5 significant accounting estimates that are within the unified government's CAFR. These 5 estimates are the same estimates that have been included in the CAFR in prior years, with the only minor change of how that OPEB liability is being reported, because that is one of the significant estimates as well. In regards to estimates, we do inquire management about how those estimates are determined. We receive all the supporting information that goes into developing those estimates. And through all of that work, we determine that these estimates are being reasonably calculated and reported within the financial statements. Throughout the audit process, we did have a few audit adjustments that we have listed in detail within the letter, but very high level. 4 of those adjustments related to the receivable revenue side of the financial statements. 3 of them related to long-term liability adjustments. And these adjustments were done to properly reflect activity throughout the year. And I'll touch base on these audit adjustments again here shortly as well. The last audit adjustment we did during the year was related to capital asset recording, particularly recording construction and process projects within the financial statements. We had one uncorrected misstatement. I always think that's kind of a bad term. All an uncorrected misstatement is something that we identified during the audit and usually towards the end of the audit process that management did not determine significant enough to actually post the entry and reflect it within the financial statements. And we agreed that it didn't significantly impact the financial statements. And those uncorrected misstatements tend to resolve themselves naturally in the next fiscal year. So this issue will be just naturally resolved during fiscal year 18. Kind of buried in the middle of this letter, you're going to see a few disclosures. They kind of get lost, so I always like to point them out because I think they're important. We had no disagreements with management, no issues, no concerns working with management. Kathleen, Debbie, Pam at the accounting and finance departments, as well as a handful of other departments that we actually do work with during the financial statement audit. Everyone is great to work with and cooperates with our questions and our requests for information and helps us get through the audit process efficiently. Tonight, I do have one significant deficiency that we are required to communicate. This relates to the year-end accounting and financial reporting process, so it's at the year-end to prepare the comprehensive annual financial report itself. For those that have been involved for years, this is a finding that the unified government has had in prior years. Many years ago, this was a material weakness, which is more severe than a significant deficiency. That got downgraded for a few years to a significant deficiency, which is the first level of deficiencies we're required to communicate to the board level. Last year, that was resolved, but this year, as I mentioned about the audit adjustments, with the transition of the accounting manager transitioning over to the Treasury Department, during the time that all of this work has to take place, not only was there a loss of resources, but more importantly, there was a loss of experience. As a lot of these audit adjustments only happen once a year, so it's not part of the reoccurring operations. It's usually only done to get the financial report pulled together. So there is also attached to this letter an Appendix A, which is management's response to this finding. They already have an action plan in place in order to address this moving forward. At the end of our required communications, we do have just a few risk areas that we like to communicate to all of our boards for all entities. I'm going to highlight one of those. It's related to information security governance. In the IT world today, there's just a lot of risk out there. So we'd like to provide some information about what's going on just to help you start thinking about some of those risks that might be applicable to the unified government. I am going to switch gears just a bit and actually report on our report on the comprehensive financial statement. So out of this 200 and some page report, our piece of it's 2 pages long. It's the opinion on the financial statements. So as in prior years, we have issued an unmodified opinion related to the CAFR, which is also known as a clean opinion, and means that the information provided within this report is materially stated and can be relied upon by users of the financial statements. One thing you might notice in our opinion that's a little bit different than last year is we have an emphasis of a matter paragraph. That's related to the implementation of the new accounting standard. Because it did have a significant impact on the financial statements, we like to put that in our opinion to give readers kind of a heads up before they get into the document that there's going to be a reason why some items aren't comparable because there was a new standard implemented. That is part of my required communications. Is there any questions specifically for me related to the 2017 audit?
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding that one finding that we've had and then it went away and then it came back, as I look at your 2-page letter, is that documented? Is that item documented in this?
Yes.
And I'm just not seeing it?
It is on page 4 and on to page 5. Oh, it's not in the opinion, no. It's not in the financial statements. It doesn't impact the financial statement numbers. it's a control issue. So it's part of this letter that we give to the board that has required communications.
Okay, so my electronic version of this document does have the entirety of that letter, correct? Because all I see from AGH is an independent auditor's report that's 2 pages long.
You should also have a letter that has required communications.
Is that letter in my electronic version?
Commissioner, I don't know that I can answer that. Did you upload this letter with it when you did the initial CAFR into the document on Monday?
Okay.
Okay, so no, it's not. We'll need to get that officially with the clerk. So this was just completed at the end of the week, so we'll need to get that added to as part of the formal agenda.
Thank you. If I could just receive a copy of that, I would appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so there's no action required, is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor. The commission just receives the annual audit and the information that's presented with it. There's no approval of on your part of that item.
Thank you. That takes us to item number 2, that is the SAFER grant. So this item was blue sheeted. I'd like to just, again, as it explains here, I want to thank, first of all, Chief Shirley and his staff for putting together the application. I specifically requested that this be brought before the commission. I felt it was necessary for, and I actually would, the plan was that we would bring the SAFER application through the budget process itself so that we could see it in the context of the larger budget, our requirements, what our constraints are in terms of our financials. So I thought that it would be important to see this application for additional funding in the larger context. Part of the grant application is that there has to be a letter of support from the governing body that we would match the funds over the course of the application period, of the grant period. So that's what we'd be voting for today, would be whether we would, the sense of the governing body, we would support the application, and that letter would then go forward. So having said that, I'd like to now pass this on to Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the clarification of going into the reason this came on the agenda this week, as this requirement came down earlier than we anticipated to have a letter of recommendation with it. And I also recognize staff, Chief Shirley and his staff, appreciate putting the effort forward to get this document done, so it was in time in the event we decided to move forward with it. The application has submitted request 24 firefighters. It has a 3-year commitment to us, which would be about $1.5 million in funding. As I go through and prepare the annual budget, I will say the emphasis that I'm working on this year in the budget is how we can purchase equipment for the fire department in terms of pumpers, trucks that'll be there, bunker gear, much needed for the safety of our firefighters that we currently have on staff, and also working on our future facilities plan that we're working with. And that all in line with the Commission's Directive 2 to reduce our overall reliance on the mill rate. As this grant and the staffing requirements that's put forth in this require us to have it doesn't require us. Afterward, there's really no identified way that we would offset the $2.5 million annual funding request to maintain or sustain the staffing. And also, as I look at this, that this so far has been an annual grant opportunity that we can look at. My feeling is that we would be better served to work through our strategy of where we are financially, the direction we're going with the fire department, and how we can look at ways that we would be able to sustain our staffing levels in the future if we were to increase them in a given year. So with that, and in coordination with the budget that I'm looking to present next month, I would not recommend that we submit this grant application this year.
Any comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner McGee?
So just so I'm clear, County Administrator Bakke, you're recommending we do not make the application, but it's on the agenda because the fire department wants to make the application.
The fire department made the application, as many departments do, to look forward to the opportunities to do it. I would not have moved forward with it. The mayor asked that he thought it would be a good idea to bring it before the full commission, explain where we are today in relation to the overall budget, since we're not able to work it through the budget process. And yes, that's correct. We typically don't bring grants forward to say don't submit them, but felt that that was the right way to bring it forward this evening and let you understand the strategy I'm looking at right now.
Just to be clear, Commissioner, which I guess I didn't finish my thoughts before. So we wanted to submit the application. We understood that we could proceed with the application, but that we would not need to provide a letter of support from the commission until August, late August, which would have allowed us to bring this proposal and any other proposal for funding from other places to the commission to consider all the budget requests in the context of the budget, and from that point be able to make a decision whether we would support this. But last week, Chief Shirley was notified that they had to have the letter by the end of this month. So that's why it was blue sheeted to this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Bynum?
Commissioner McGee, I didn't want to take the floor if you still had.
I do have a follow-up question. So have we applied for this grant before? I think so.
Yes, we have.
And how many times do you know roughly?
Ooh, I think we've had it twice.
Okay. And if you've applied twice, have you received it twice?
Yes.
Both times you've applied, you've gotten it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. I'm a little confused. My time here so far with items like this, including a major grant through the police department, and any grant that requires a match, comes through a process. And that process in this case would have been, at a minimum, at some point appearing in front of Public Works and Safety. And that never happened. And I don't know why. I can appreciate wanting to put it in front of us. I guess it's unfortunate that it's in front of us ahead of a budget discussion. But again, it takes me back to the process. We have processes in place for things just like this, and I don't know why none of them seem to have been followed. I don't know why, I've never seen the grant until I walked in here at 7 p.m. So, it troubles me knowing what we are hoping to bring forward in terms of further tax reduction through our mill levy. It's a concern. It's a concern about committing us to the level of local required match is significant. And if we've applied for it in the past and it sounds like maybe been successful with that application, then it sounds like chances are good we could be successful again. It's just really hard for me when I have no analysis of what the problem is this grant application tries to solve. I just have a really hard time moving forward with that, especially ahead of us working on our budget. We would have, in a normal process, worked through all of this ahead. So it just leaves me a little confused and a little unclear. That's it.
Yes, thank you. So I would suggest, state that that it did not go, if it was supposed to go through, whether it was required to go through the standing committee, that's on me. So I'll take responsibility for that. The way this was presented to us, Chief Shirley proceeded with the grant application, and there was an opportunity for us to proceed with it, and there was a time constraint on the application itself when it had to be turned in. And so, but the thought was that it would go through the process, through the normal budget process and be brought forward, but because of the letter that was received last week saying we needed to have the letter of support from the governing body if we're going to provide one by the end of the month, that's why it's here tonight. So I'm going to, if you would rack that up to a rookie mistake. Commissioner Murguia.
Thanks, Mayor. Does this grant address our minimum manning requirements that we keep hearing about?
Yeah, it would take steps to go toward that, yes.
Okay, and then, so let me see, I, like Commissioner Bond, I'm just seeing this, so I just have a couple of questions about the grant. So all of this grant, this is a federal grant, correct, first of all?
Yes.
Okay, and what it says is that if we get the grant, help me here, we'll have to hire those firefighters in 2019 or 2020?
Within 180 days.
Of receiving the grant?
Yes.
Receiving the grant? And then when do we anticipate hearing back on the grant if it's submitted?
Chief Shirley, correct me if I'm wrong, into September?
Well, I think you're going to hear.
Would you come forward to the microphone, please?
Thank you. The idea behind the grant is that they notified us that they want the letter of support on the 30th because they are going to start the awards shortly. Okay, I don't have a timetable. I don't know September. I don't know August. I'm thinking it's July. I don't know that for certain, but it is coming.
Okay.
And we are there.
Okay, so that's okay. So let's just make up, it's this year then.
Correct.
And then, so let's just say September, okay? So from September, how much time does the grant allow you to hire these 24 officers?
We have 180 days from the time the grant is awarded.
So you have 180 days to hire 24 new firemen?
That is correct.
Okay. And then we're required, per the federal match, to maintain this level of staffing for 2 years, it sounds like?
No, for 3 years. After 3 years, there is no requirement.
After 3 years, then?
Attrition, termination.
Okay. So the total cost of that over 3 years for us, is that the $2 million you have in here, administrative?
It's 1.5 million.
So our cost is 1.5 million over 3 years?
Correct.
To meet the minimum manning requirements?
To meet the additional 24 staff members.
We will not meet the entire minimum standard throughout the fire department with 24 firefighters, but we will make significant gains, and that's what we're shooting for.
It's tempting to begin negotiations with you right now. So can you stop me if I can't ask this question, or can legal stop me? I'm not sure what I can ask and what I can't ask of our fire chief. So would the fire department agree, if we approve this grant for the next 3 years, that for the next 3 years, that would suffice for minimum manning?
I can't say that, you know.
Who can say
what
that?
I can, well, I think we have to look at, like I said, we are not going to minimum man all the rigs with this 24. There won't be enough.
Right, I hear you, and I get that, and I think it's very important, but it's a giant step in the right direction.
Absolutely, it's a giant step in the right direction.
So just for 3 years, would the fire department agree that that would suffice for minimum manning for the next 3 years?
I think the fire department would say that we are moving towards minimum manning, and that we are doing, it's a giant step. You're absolutely right. Just like the manning of the aerials, the manning of the quints with 4.
Yeah.
It's a giant step. Now we're ready to move for 6 more to move forward.
Yeah, so Chief, this is my position on the deal, and I've talked to the union about this as well. I'm all about the minimum manning requirements. I really want to get us there, but we have, as the other commissioners have expressed, so many other financial demands placed on us. But I do believe what the sort of the philosophy has been over the last 8 years at least is those projects that are grant funded should become a priority. And what I would hate to see happen, though, is that we approve this and say, let's try to figure this out over the next 3 years, and then immediately the fire department is still coming back at the government for minimum manning. I think this is a step in the right direction, and for me, if we could meet some sort of compromise for the next 3 years, that right now this is all we have to dedicate to additional firefighters, but we are in agreement that we're all moving in the right direction. If we could come to some sort of agreement, I'm only speaking for myself.
Sure.
That that'd be very impactful on how I would vote.
Commissioner Philbrook?
Okay, I just want to make it really clear, because I'm, still going, okay, we now want a bunch of money all of a sudden. I'm like going, okay, money that we already knew that, as the mayor said, we're looking for money to take care of everything, and now all of a sudden we're asked for another bunch of money that we hadn't even planned on, and we're already looking for stuff. So that threw me off. The other thing is, so does that mean 500,000 a year, or does that mean 1.5 a year? Total over the 3 years. Yeah. I'm just trying to make sure I thought I heard that, but I don't like to assume anything.
It's a percentage a year, and it goes up a little bit each year. So it's lower in the first year, and then it goes up each year after that.
What are those amounts? Sorry, Commissioner, I just wanted, while you're on it, I was wondering, what are those amounts every year?
You know them offhand, Chief?
It's 75%, 75%, and 35%. That's what the federal government will pay, 75%, 75%, and 35%. The first year for this grant is $383 or so, and $383. Go for that. 383,000. Okay. 383,000 for 24 firefighters for the first year. Okay. Next year, 384,000. I believe that is correct, right, Chief?
And then
so for the first year, that's what it is. For the second year, that's what it is. And finally, the third year is 840,000.
Okay, so.
Sorry.
So that's okay. So I appreciate that information. I think that my biggest problem with this is that not that whether we should have it or not that whether we need additional firefighters, but our problem as elected officials is that we have to listen also to people who talk to us about how we're spending our money, okay? And it's not just one persuasion. There are a lot of different folks out there, and we have to listen to all of them. And if we're to make a decision like this that quickly, before we've had a chance to actually review this and go through the right steps, the steps that we've taken in the past, already know they're not happy. Okay, and so you bringing it forward is, you feel your job, and you did what your job was. But now we have a job to decide how we're going to deal with your request. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I understand that, and I had no idea that I was going to receive this letter that said it had to be done by the 30th. I had submitted that a letter of support must be done before we can accept the grant. And so wherever that, if I put somewhere that it was August 30th, my apologies, because I didn't do it on purpose. I would have never done that.
I don't believe that you did anything on purpose.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that the idea that we need to, it's 383,000. That's not going to buy a fire station. Let's be reasonable. It's not going to buy 2 fire stations. It's not going to do anything for our fire stations. Okay. We can't buy a pumper with that 383,000. That's not enough. We can't buy a truck with that 383,000. But we could get 24 guys. Okay. So that's just.
And I appreciate all of that.
All right.
As I said, though, it becomes an issue around us actually following policy that we put into effect because of last-minute requests, and that's why we tried to put into effect going over our budget and really, honing it down. So this becomes a big fly in the ointment.
Right.
Because there's a lot of other places that need the money too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, like Commissioner Philbrook, I'm on record more than once as saying that I don't like to get information at the last minute, not have a chance to see how it fits into the overall strategic plan that we might have, to consider alternatives, to consider options, and to be forced to make a decision. Having said that, I do have a question. We have received 2 prior grants, correct?
That's correct, as far as I remember. Now, I know we applied for many, so.
And so in each case, were there 24 people brought on with each of those?
No, it was dependent upon what we felt we could possibly get and utilize.
And you just said a moment ago that we didn't need to keep those people, that they could be brought on as a function of the grant, but that numbers could return to prior levels due to attrition and other factors that would affect personnel numbers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So do we know, do we have a net increase? What's our net position in terms of firefighters based on the ones that we added by receiving the other grants?
I'd be reluctant to tell you that because I don't have I've never even considered that. Yes, I do. Chief Jack Andrade.
Good evening.
Good evening. 2007,
we went through a recession. Everybody should remember that. At that time, we went down 44 firefighters in 2008. In 2009, we put a grant in for SAFER to try to replenish those, and we got a 25 personnel grant from that, SAFER grant, the first one. That got us back to our staffing number of 420, which was 16 less. So we were still short at that time in 2010. In 2012, we put in another SAFER grant to replenish the other 16, which got us back to 436 at our original number in 2007. Facets came in and figured out that, that grant money was going away. And we needed to figure out a way to save those positions. And we were told we couldn't do that. We couldn't absorb it in our budget. So we lost those to attrition. And today our manning is 420 personnel. Okay? So these 24 positions that we're asking for today is to try to comply with NFPA 1710 that states that we need 90% response times at 4 minutes, 90% of the time with 4 people on those rigs on the scene at that moment. And today we don't do that. I have some statistics here. 90% in 2017, 90% of the incidences, we made it in 4 minutes and 59 seconds. Okay? The standard states that we should make it within a 4-minute period. So out of 30,000 calls, we made it on the scene 90% of the time, 4 minutes and 59 seconds. So this,
Chief, if I could, how does number of personnel affect that time?
So the number of personnel on the scene of a structure fire or a medical call or a specialized call, we need 4 personnel to operate at a higher standard, and we're not meeting that standard.
Okay, so that's the amount of time it took to get those 4 people
That's correct.
on the scene.
And currently today, we have 14 pumpers that have 3 men on it throughout the city. So what we're looking at is trying to put 6 additional pumpers with an extra man so that we're targeting high hazard areas. For example, KU, the railroad system. We'd like to staff a couple of pumpers there with 4 man. Fairfax, headquarters.
Sure. So Chief, if this is a known commodity, and was this part of and you're saying we need more firefighters, was that included as part of a strategic plan? Was that included as part of an initial budget proposal for the 2019 budget? If we need to go up, did we just wait for this grant, or was there already a plan in place to begin achieving what you say is necessary?
In December of 2017, we asked to apply for the SAFER grant to start meeting that minimum requirement. In 2015, when facets came out, they stated that we needed to try to figure out a way to comply with NFPA 1710, and that's what we're trying to do. Without there being such a big financial hit right off the bat. To put 14 firefighters on the streets today, or 14 pumpers with 4 men on it, times our staffing factor of 4.1, it's going to take at least 58 personnel to do that. And we understand that that's a real undertaking. It's too many personnel to even ask for. And that was for the NFPA standard that was the 2015 standard. The standard changed in 2016. So where it calls for additional personnel on certain specialized rigs. Okay.
So your estimate is that it'll take $2.5 million per year to sustain those 24 people beyond the time of the grant?
Correct. Yeah, I believe that was the number we
It will take an annual personnel expenditure of $2.5 million to sustain those 24 firefighters after the grant has expired.
Correct.
And we're no longer getting the match.
That's correct.
Okay.
So in the first year, the federal government put 75% towards those 24 personnel, and we pay the other portion, which is $323,000.
And so this is an attempt by the federal government to help local fire departments to staff up by mitigating the upfront costs and allowing them time, I guess, to find where the money's going to come from.
That's correct. That's correct. In 2010 and 2012, those SAFER grants were 100% federal government funded, and now they figured out, hey, you know what, we got to get our municipalities to figure out how they can keep those firefighters in year 4.
Well, I guess my continuing question that I haven't answered for myself is, I get it, we're going to get a match for the first 3 years. Where do we find the money after the grant has expired and we desire to keep those bodies in the firehouse? I'm at a loss as to where we get that significant money.
Commissioner, I think that's where my concern is with it.
Okay.
Not that it wouldn't be good to have additional firefighters come on, but it's a matter of looking at it from a perspective of what's our long-range strategic plan that we're going to do. If we think this is a good idea now, how do we sustain it going forward?
Okay.
And is it a priority over other things we want to put financially or not? And right now, as I'm structuring the budget, it's not. But then we can move away from some of the other items that we're looking to fund if that's.
Okay, so I guess that's my question is, if we decide to go for this, we're going to need to make a strategic decision in our budget planning sessions of the next month as to what we would choose not to fund, because you're presenting a balanced budget, and we would need to strategically find what it is we're not going to fund to be able to fund this in the short run, and then start ramping up and planning for longer term, larger dollar funding as we move.
And I think with the commission direction to move in the area of mill reduction, that longer term one is one that gets me considerable concern, because 1 or 2 mills is a couple $1 million. Right. So if I'm going to add that much to the long-term expectation, if that is the expectation, then I'm going to need a lot more than just a.
Chief, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner Markley?
I just had one question. At one point, you might need to come back up for this, I'm not sure, but maybe. At one point, you mentioned in the prior years when we applied for a grant, we applied for a smaller number of positions because that was what we thought we could handle. Is that a possibility with this, or is the 24 what you have to apply for?
No, the 24 are what we applied for, and that's what will be given to us unless there's a hardship of some kind. And I just want to make it clear that there was nothing ever done by the fire department. Chief Andrade did an excellent job getting this grant together. A lot of work involved. This is a competitive grant against all fire departments in the United States, volunteer and professional. And so to be given this opportunity is one we don't want to squander. So I appreciate your careful thought on it.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, and I appreciate the effort that you've put into the grant and frankly, everything that you do. And I've just got to get my head around what we're dealing with, and I'm sorry that we're doing that at 9 o'clock in the evening. And Mayor, to your point about taking the blame and responsibility for a misstep in a process, I appreciate that, but you don't work on an island here, and there are a lot of people here who do know the processes of these actions. And so, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. It looks like this application process started in March-ish that I can see on the application. I've got a couple of questions. I want to make sure I heard correctly the dollar figure that we're asking for, or we've best anticipated for after 3 years, then the local figure is 2.5 million annual.
Yes.
Okay, and that factors in the potential attrition that we've been speaking of.
No, that's the
just the
factors
cost
in if
of
we were
24
to
firefighters.
maintain our current staffing level, the 420, and then add additional 24 to it.
Because
So that's
earlier we
additional
spoke about some of the costs being mitigated because through attrition and retirements, we wouldn't bear the full cost of the 24. So I really need to understand that better.
As the chief said, 180 days out from the date you start this process. So if they awarded the end of this year, so somewhere in the first of next year, we would staff up to 24. So we would need to be staffed up to the level to hit our 420 plus the additional 24. Then for the next 3 years, so through the years 19, 20, and 21, since it works on whole years, that makes it easier, we would need to be staffed at that level of 444. And then after the date that the grant would end, so somewhere in January of 2022, then you could start to allow attrition, if that were the direction we deemed we wanted to do in 2022, to let, you could let some numbers go down.
And that would be mostly because of retirements, I'm assuming. I
would assume that. I certainly would not assume we'd go forward with this with any thought of termination.
Okay, I mean, correct. And other than those two, I don't know of very many ways folks leave employ in the fire department, fortunately for us. So I got to back up to the 2008, 2009 prior SAFER grants that you were speaking of. In 2008, we got hit with the recession. In 2009, we were able to apply and receive a SAFER grant and add 25 personnel.
That's correct.
So what happened between 2008 and 2009?
Just attrition.
Just normal
attrition.
retirements?
And we couldn't hire between those years.
Because we were
That's
in
correct.
an economic crunch?
That's correct.
Okay, I was just wanting to make sure I understood the correlation there. So we hired the 25, and then did we get another one after that that you spoke of?
In 2012,
And hired how many?
an additional 16 to get us back to our regular number of 436.
Okay, and so, and today we're at 420.
420.
So you would say then that from SAFER grant number 2 to now, back down to the 420 because of the...
Because of attrition.
Attrition.
Correct.
So then we could say that in the current one going forward, that would be 7 or 8 years, maybe. I don't know what else we have to go by that attrition over time would transpire. And so now I'm trying to get at 2.5 million a year annual for
Correct.
I got,
Between 2015 and 2018, we had a lot of retirements.
okay.
So, I mean,
And we do know that we are in our baby boomer cycle of folks retiring, so it's potential that we could see more now than we did then. That's a possibility, just because people are aging and retiring. I'm just trying to get myself to a good, clear understanding of what we're dealing with.
correct.
That's all.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Bynum. You walked through a very solid scenario there as to the financial as well as the employee status that we will be dealing with. But I do want to bring to the Commission's attention, to the public's attention, we won't, this grant is $383,000 the first year, 383 or 320. $323,000 for the first 2 years. That's just under $700,000. The third year, we're going to take a bite of $800,000+. It's not till the fourth year that we will see the full cost of these firefighters. We were talking about a 3-year scenario where we lost 16 firefighters over the last grant period. To go out and try to recruit those number of firefighters without assistance from a federal agency that's willing to partner with local governments would be quite a fiscal challenge for us. And I'm one that wants to ensure that our public safety servants are well maintained at a level that is safe. I want to ensure that the equipment you have is well maintained and safe. We are faced with a tremendous challenge here with the budget moving forward. I would hope that we go back during this budget process and give strong consideration to the future needs of our community. We're bringing in more industry, more residential growth, and we should have nothing less than a first-class fire department and a responding process in place as a unified government. That should be our mission, to provide a service. But it should be efficient, and it should be effective, and it should be financially, fiscally sound. And the worst thing I would hate to see is we bring on 24, and then in 4 years, we have to make cuts, whether it be financial or whether it be an economic downturn. So help us help you in identifying what we can do. And it can happen within the ranks, it can happen across the community, and looking at some procedures in place to find a growth process that is not such a fiscal impact on us in 4 years. And we don't know that 1710 is, you keep quoting 1710, that's the 4-man service. And I have to ask, I have to echo Commissioner McKiernan's comment that it's a little hard for laymen to understand how adding a 4th person to a truck eliminates the time frame and makes it quicker. That's your profession. I want to be a good partner. I'm sure every commissioner up here wants to be a good partner with our public safety. I truly believe that $383,000 is a great deal to put trained, responsible people on the road for public safety. The fiscal aspect is what I struggle with. And Mayor, I would hope that we have strong discussions in reference to that come the budget process.
Sure. Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Chief Shirley, Chief Andrade. I won't go over a lot of the good points that I've heard already from my fellow commissioners. I do want to highlight a couple. One, Chief Shirley, you just used the term careful thought. And that is what is leading me to want to support the recommendation of our administrator, given everything I've heard here. I, for one, and I don't think anyone here wants to do this in a vacuum and still be good partners. As Commissioner Burrows said, Commissioner Bynum made a great point just about the process. I, for one, just feel that we would be doing this in a vacuum almost, not having had the overall discussions that we're planning for the budget cycle. And once we get them, as Commissioner Burrows said, I have a concern that we don't want to be hit with having to decrease that number when we're trying to get to the number. I'm also encouraged by the fact that the administrator in the plan we expect to hear is putting money toward the infrastructure and equipment for the fire department. So we are considering the fire department already. And the other thing on the summary sheet indicates that this will probably not be the only opportunity we have to get a SAFER grant. So those things encourage me to make the motion to follow the recommendation here, since we are budget discussion cycle, to not go forward with this at this time, and then hopefully come back and look at it at a later time. So that's the motion I'd make.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'd just like to offer a few comments. The other thing, again, the ideal situation would have been for this to actually proceed through the budget process in the context of all the other demands upon our limited means. But also, I think as we know, we're in the process of hiring a new fire chief. And I think that there are several issues that this fire chief is going to have to address, as we know. It's going to be, at what level are we able to meet 1710? We're going to have to, again, look at the fire stations themselves. We have to look at the placement of those stations. There's a lot on this person's desk as soon as they come in, and I'm of the mind and the opinion that we're better off letting this person come in and address all of those things in their way and present to us as their responsibility their recommendations for making sure that we provide the best quality fire service to our community, and obviously in a fiscally sustainable way. So in my sense is, if I thought we could not go back out for the SAFER grant, I might be of a different mind, but I think I'm deferring to next year at the earliest. Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor, and I apologize to the commissioners for taking a second bite at the apple here. Are we on a hard deadline here?
Absolutely.
The hard deadline is tomorrow?
30th.
The 30th?
The letter has to be in.
And without the letter, what happens then?
We are done. We are out of it.
For a year?
For this year. Yeah, I don't know how the peer reviewers are going to accept that. I don't know that. You're asking me how they do their grants at that point. I don't know. Going through all this, we passed through the peer technical review. We're passing through the peer review right now. They're asking us for information. Are you going to support? They asked a question about uniforms, just those types of things. So that means we are in the process. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get it, but they wrote specifically the 30th is the due date for that letter.
Has that been the same time frame in the previous grants?
No, there was always time frames, but last time the letters, as I remember them, were strictly, hey, these would help your process if you wanted to put them. It wasn't mandatory. Now I think they're asking that the different ones, the governments will support that. I think that's what they're after, that they're not giving these grants out and nobody's taking them. They're trying to avoid that.
All right, thank you, Chief.
You bet.
All right, we do have a motion. Is there a second?
We have a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call: Johnson.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
No.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
No.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
No.
The vote is 6-3. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, that now takes us to the Commissioner's agenda. We have the UG Hollywood Casino, Schlitterbahn Vacation Village grants. I'll turn the meeting over to Administrator Bach.
Thank you, Mayor. We have before you in your packets the recommendations that were submitted to Mr. Cross as he assembled them for what the commissioners recommended where they be awarded for the Hollywood and Schlitterbahn Vacation Village Casino grant money. Notifications upon approval by the commission will go out to these awardees on July 6th. If you would like, I can have Mr. Cross go through this and provide a presentation on it.
Move approval of the recommendations.
Second. We have a roll call, please.
Roll call Johnson.
Aye.
Barclay.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McCunin.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0, that motion carries.
We are adjourned. Thank you.